You are listening to The Vocal Technologist. Spoken tech for your ears.
Slapping artificial intelligence onto an existing product and expecting a billion-dollar valuation is a guaranteed way to watch your startup collapse.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty brutal to watch, honestly.
It really is. I have got this massive stack of postmortems from failed tech companies, behavioral science research papers, and incredibly dense engineering blogs sitting right here. And the pattern is undeniably clear.
Absolutely. The data does not lie.
Right. All those companies whose entire pitch was basically that they do an old thing but with a chat interface are getting absolutely crushed.
Yeah, because their users, or even the major platforms themselves, are just absorbing whatever tiny bit of incremental value they offered and then just moving on.
Exactly. The companies that are actually winning are not using this technology as a marketing gimmick. They are using it to solve incredibly stubborn, meaningful problems. Welcome to Vocal Technologist. As your designated tech-savvy mate, my mission is to pull apart these concepts so you do not have to read 50 different articles.
Which is a massive time saver, let us be honest.
We try. We are going to look under the hood of modern product development and figure out what actually works when the tech hype fades.
And what is fascinating about looking under the hood is that the fundamental rules of building products are being entirely rewritten.
I mean, they have to be, right?
Exactly. We have handed engineers the ultimate power tool, but the industry is suddenly realizing the tool was never actually the real bottleneck.
Okay, I want to unpack that because it feels like a massive contradiction to everything we are told.
How so?
Well, the most heavily advertised benefit of artificial intelligence is pure speed. Like, it writes code in seconds. So if the coding part is exponentially faster, why on earth are we not shipping better products faster?
Because we completely misidentified where the actual traffic jam is.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Artificial intelligence coding assistants are absolutely brilliant at generating lines of code quickly. You give an instruction and it spits out 500 lines. But the actual delivery of a usable, secure product is not just about typing syntax. The process is still entirely choked by specification and verification.
So the human still has to figure out exactly what to build, write it all down in excruciating detail, and then after the machine spits out the code, verify that it actually does what we meant it to do.
Spot on. And check that it does not break the rest of the application or violate compliance rules. The verification step alone is a massive hurdle.
Yeah, I can imagine.
If the machine writes a complex database query, an engineer still has to review it to ensure it does not accidentally delete user data or, create a massive security vulnerability.
It is like putting a Ferrari engine in a car, but keeping the same dirt road.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
You are not actually getting to your destination any faster. You're just reaching the traffic jam faster. And the traffic jam is our own inability to decide what we want and check if we actually got it.
Exactly. And because the actual execution part, the building part, is becoming so automated, the premium skill has shifted completely away from execution.
Really? So what is the premium skill now?
It has shifted entirely to judgment. Take product design as a prime example. There is a massive shift happening where designers are realizing they do not actually dictate the future of design anymore.
Wow, okay. Who does then?
Market forces do. The software tools will handle the pixel pushing, the color palettes, and the layout generation.
So all the visual stuff is basically solved.
Pretty much. The true value a human brings now is framing the problem correctly and making the right strategic calls on what the market actually needs to solve a real pain point.
Deciding what to build is vastly more important than knowing how to build exactly the right rounded corners on a button.
Exactly.
If you are listening to this on your commute, think about your own team backlog right now. How many of those tickets are just people guessing what users want, hidden behind the excuse that things take a long time to build?
Heaps of them, I guarantee it.
But wait, how do you actually measure something as vague as judgment? If I'm writing code, you can measure my output. You can see if it compiles. Judgment sounds like a subjective feeling a manager just puts on a performance review when they do not have any real metrics.
I get that. It sounds nebulous until you break it down into a specific 4-part rubric that high-performing teams are starting to adopt.
Okay, I am listening.
It consists of evidence, clarity, trade-offs, and impact.
Hold on. Evidence and impact are easy to measure. Did we use data? And did the metric go up? But clarity. How do you put a metric on clarity without it just devolving back into a manager giving it a vibe check?
You measure clarity by looking at the friction it removes from the system. Can a junior engineer pick up your project brief, understand the core problem, and build the right solution without having to ask you 20 different clarifying questions.
Right, because if they have to constantly stop and ask for direction, your clarity score is 0.
Spot on. It is about the ability to articulate the proposed solution so simply that the whole team moves in the same direction autonomously.
I see the mechanics there. And what about trade-offs?
Trade-offs are crucial because good judgment means acknowledging what you are explicitly giving up. If you choose path A, you are deciding not to do path B.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You need to document why path A is worth that specific cost. It forces honesty. You can no longer hide behind the excuse that building the prototype takes too long.
Because you can build the prototype instantly now.
Exactly. So if it fails because your initial judgment on those trade-offs was fundamentally flawed.
Wait, so we should be using artificial intelligence as that one brutally honest friend who pokes holes in your brilliant 2 a.m. ideas.
Pretty much.
Which, yeah, is exactly as terrifying as it sounds. But if we are firing the product managers who run on vibes and replacing them with people who use this strict judgment rubric, how does that judgment actually get communicated to the machine?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because you cannot just hand a large language model a list of trade-offs and expect a software application. We are essentially throwing out the traditional product requirements document, are we not?
Oh, 100%. The traditional product requirements document is a complete relic. What we are seeing is a shift to continuous evals.
So we are moving from written documents to evals. But making that jump means you are forcing product managers to stop writing Word documents and start writing mathematical scoring functions. That is a massive skills gap for a lot of people.
It is a steep learning curve, I will not lie, but it is the only way to ensure quality when the underlying technology is non-deterministic.
Because the machine has a mind of its own, sort of.
Yeah. Building an artificial intelligence product means you are dealing with probabilities, not certainties. The machine might answer the same question slightly differently every single time.
Right, which is a nightmare for quality control.
Exactly. So you define product quality using hard data, incredibly specific tasks, and scoring functions.
Walk me through how an eval actually works under the hood.
Imagine you are building a customer service bot. An eval is not a human sitting there reading the chat logs at the end of the week.
Thank goodness for that.
Right. It is a secondary artificial intelligence model specifically instructed to read the bot output and score it from 1 to 10 on politeness and policy accuracy every single time new code is pushed.
Wow. So you define the test, the machine runs the test thousands of times, it gets a score, and you iterate the product based on that mathematical score.
Spot on.
It pushes my old analogy further. The old product requirements document was basically a dusty recipe book that sits on a shelf and no one actually reads once the cooking starts.
That is so true.
But these continuous evals are like having a master chef tasting panel sitting in your kitchen. But instead of tasting the final dish, they are tasting every single grain of salt you drop in the pan in real time, hundreds of times a second, and dynamically adjusting the heat of the stove for you.
That captures the intensity of the feedback loop perfectly, and this fundamentally changes the role of the product manager. An AI PM has to know how to translate a vague business goal, like making customers happier, into a mathematically scoring eval that the engineering team can actually use. They become curators of context.
Curators of context, I like that. But even if you have perfect continuous evals and your judgment is absolutely flawless, none of it matters if the artificial intelligence lacks context. Or worse, if the end user just flat out refuses to adopt it.
Yeah, trust is the ultimate hurdle here. These systems are incredibly powerful, but they are totally unreliable if they do not have specific business context.
Because a large language model has read the entire internet, but it does not know your company refund policy from last Tuesday.
Exactly. To trust artificial intelligence with your data, you need systems that encode your specific business context, track changes over time, and measure accuracy continuously against your own private data.
Which brings me to a truly wild fact I found while we were pulling all this research together.
Oh, yeah. What is that?
In this era of futuristic, highly capable software agents that can reason and write code, the humble static website is actually more important than ever.
It sounds backwards, but it is true.
I have to push back on this with genuine skepticism, though. We are building autonomous systems, but the website format from the 1990s is still where users decide to trust you.
It comes down to the mechanics of answer engine optimization.
Okay, unpack that for me.
When an artificial intelligence agent is crawling the web to formulate an answer for a user, It needs authoritative sources to ground its logic. It strips away all the flashy user interfaces and looks for pure, structured semantic data.
So it does not care about your pretty animations.
Not at all. It looks for verifiable physical addresses, strong domain authority, and clear human-authored policies. Your website is that anchor.
Right.
It is where you control your narrative in a format the machine actually understands as authoritative.
Because ultimately, nothing is truly dead in tech. The ultimate constraint on all technology is human behavior. If people still fundamentally trust a verified domain name over a random chat interface, then the artificial intelligence agent has to trust the domain name too.
We are creatures of habit. A new tool only succeeds if it actually fits into real, existing human workflows.
Yeah, if a tool requires a user to fundamentally change how they spend their morning, they simply will not use it, no matter how powerful it is.
You have to design for how humans actually behave, not how you wish they behaved.
So how does that behavior change actually happen? If we are trying to introduce these massive new tools, how do we get people to adopt them without fighting human nature?
Behavior change relies on 3 pillars: motivation, extremely low friction, and repetition. Lasting habits only form from small, consistent actions that are reinforced over time.
Okay, give me an example.
Think about how a behavioral scientist would approach designing a fintech app for budgeting. They do not just throw a bunch of complex spreadsheets at the user and expect them to magically change their spending habits.
Because spreadsheets have massive friction.
Exactly. Instead, they align the app with the user core values. They create mechanisms for commitment, making the desired actions incredibly simple and rewarding.
Right.
You lower the friction so much that doing the right thing becomes easier than doing the wrong thing. You might use a simple swipe gesture to categorize an expense, followed by a small visual reward.
That immediately reminds me of the insights from the former RuneScape designer who went on to build a massive business-to-business enterprise product.
Oh, that is a great example. The gaming industry has known about these psychological loops for decades.
We really have.
What did they carry over from gaming to enterprise software?
Well, they took the concept of the variable reward ratio and the drop rate. In a game like RuneScape, players will grind for hours clicking on virtual trees because the game offers a variable chance of dropping a rare item.
Right. The brain just loves that unpredictability.
It gets a massive dopamine hit from the unpredictability and the clear visual feedback. This designer took that exact psychological loop and applied it to reconciling corporate expenses.
Which is usually the most boring task on Earth.
Exactly. They turned a boring, high-friction task into a series of small, low-friction actions with progress bars, delightful animations, and streak counters. They built a product that fits human behavior by focusing entirely on the right users, measuring only what actually matters, and refining everything based on real feedback.
Whether you are slaying a digital dragon or reconciling corporate travel expenses, the human brain responds to the exact same feedback loops.
It is bonkers.
If the friction is low and the reward is clear, you will keep coming back.
It is wild to me that building serious enterprise software now requires the exact same discipline, prioritization, and psychological hooks that game designers use to keep teenagers glued to their screens.
It is a strange new world. But to build those psychological hooks without getting bogged down in endless corporate red tape, the actual structure of the engineering team has to change.
Yeah, the traditional hierarchical engineering team is far too slow for this kind of iterative, high-stakes development.
One of the most effective ways to look at structuring teams for the future is to divide them into 2 very distinct roles: pirates and architects.
Pirates and architects. Okay, what is the actual daily workflow of a pirate?
Pirates are the explorers. Their entire job is to discover and ship value as quickly as humanly possible.
So they're not worried about perfect code or infinite scalability.
Not at all. They are not writing comprehensive unit tests. They are hacking things together using duct tape and existing application programming interfaces to run rapid experiments and find that elusive product-market fit.
So they are fast, scrappy, and focus purely on solving the immediate user problem to see if the psychological loop actually holds attention.
Exactly. And once the pirates find something that works, the architects step in.
The adults in the room, so to speak.
Yeah. Once the pirates prove that a specific feature actually works and users want it, the architects take over. Their workflow is completely different.
What do?
Their job is to stabilize that rough code, build the robust infrastructure around it, set up the Kubernetes clusters, and scale it up securely so it does not collapse when 1 million people try to use it simultaneously.
That naturally sets up a bold pushback against a massive Silicon Valley obsession.
Which one?
The absolute myth of scale. Everyone in tech assumes that getting huge as fast as possible is the only valid goal. But scale is just a tactic, not a virtue.
Spot on.
Founders should only be scaling if it explicitly serves their actual business goals. If your pirates find a highly profitable niche that requires very little infrastructure, you do not automatically need to build a massive global platform for it just because the architects want to play with complex server architecture.
Recognizing when to scale and when to hold back is a perfect demonstration of the executive judgment we discussed earlier. And another critical element of team structure that directly impacts this judgment is the concept of slack.
Slack as in margin, breathing room,
Right.
not the messaging application.
Right. Loose capacity within the system. Corporate culture often dictates that every employee must be utilized at 100% capacity.
Oh, absolutely. Every hour must be billed or allocated to a specific ticket in the backlog.
But overloading schedules actually causes massive delays in the long run.
Because if a server goes down or a pirate discovers a massive new opportunity in the market, no one has the time to actually look at it without throwing 5 other major projects entirely off track.
Exactly. We build systems so tightly wound that they shatter at the first sign of something unexpected.
We really do.
Leaving slack in the system creates the necessary space for new opportunities and true innovation. It gives teams the capacity to pause, run a high-quality experiment, and actually think deeply about the results rather than just rushing to close the next ticket.
Speaking of high-quality experimentation, how do the massive companies manage that without it turning into absolute chaos? If you have thousands of engineers acting as pirates with slack in their schedules, they'd just be building 1,000 different random things that go nowhere.
It is chaos unless you embed the quality and discipline directly into the tools they use every single day.
Like what?
Look at how Booking.com scales their experimentation. They run thousands of concurrent tests, but they maintain incredibly high quality by enforcing clear metrics across the board.
Right.
They use strong defaults in their testing platforms, and they ensure shared ownership of the results.
So they do not rely on individual engineers having perfect discipline.
Yeah.
They build the discipline into the software platform itself.
Exactly. You literally cannot launch an experiment without defining the exact business metric it is supposed to impact, and the eval will score it.
That is brilliant. The workflow forces you to be rigorous. The platform does the heavy lifting of ensuring statistical significance and proper routing, so the engineer can focus entirely on the hypothesis.
Yep, it takes the busy work out of being disciplined.
It is a dry observation, but the corporate obsession with 100% employee utilization is basically guaranteeing that no new good ideas will ever be discovered.
It really is.
Because apparently working at maximum capacity just means you're too busy to realize you're running in the completely wrong direction.
It is the ultimate illusion of productivity. Movement does not equal progress.
Straight up.
If you do not have the slack to utilize judgment, to review your continuous evils, and to deeply analyze human behavior, you are just building the wrong thing faster than ever before.
Which brings us to the core of everything we have unpacked. We started by laughing at the companies just slapping artificial intelligence onto old products. But look closely at your own daily workflow. Are you actually rethinking how you solve problems, or are you just putting a massive racing spoiler on your own tractor?
A racing spoiler on a tractor. I love that.
Here's a thought to leave you with. If slack and human judgment become the absolute most valuable assets in a company, we might soon see a future where tech workers are actually paid based on how few hours they code, rather than how many. Or better yet, what if the absolute pinnacle of career success just becomes the ability to sit in a quiet room, completely disconnected, and actually think deeply for an hour without looking at a screen? Catch you next time on Vocal Technologist.
Spoken Tech for your ears.